Did you know that behind the glamorous facade of the Gulf megacities, there is a country where immigrants make up 88% of the population, fill 99.5% of positions in the private sector, yet their minimal freedoms are almost non-existent? Welcome to Dubai in 2026. A city built by millions of invisible ghosts. The dream of a better life quickly turned into a brutal forced labor trap as soon as they stepped off the plane and had their passports illegally confiscated. Even more terrifying, when the geopolitical war of 2026 broke out, unleashing over 2,800 missiles and drones, these unfortunate people were denied the right to enter bomb shelters simply because they did not hold UAE citizenship. They are locked inside overcrowded Sonapur labor camps, suffocating under the record heat of 48 degrees Celsius, without money, without documents, and without any way to escape. Today, let's uncover the harsh truth about the Kafala sponsorship system, the sophisticated recruitment debt traps, and the real reasons why millions of people are being held captive, gritting their teeth and gambling their lives in the desert with no way to escape. Look at the Burj Khalifa, a wonder of the world and a symbol of the future. But from another perspective, it is a gigantic machine powered by one of the most unusual social structures on the planet. Have you ever imagined a country where its own citizens are actually a minority? The United Arab Emirates operates exactly like that. The national population has reached around 11.6 to 11.8 million people. But the real shock is that immigrants make up between 85% and 88% of the population. That means out of every 10 people you meet on the street, nearly 9 are foreign workers. In Dubai alone, this percentage exceeds 90% of the city's population of approximately 4.47 million people. This city is not an ordinary residential community. It is a gigantic factory and construction site that consumes human labor on an industrial scale. If you examine the demographic structure, you will notice a major imbalance. Men account for approximately 63.6% of the total population because massive development projects have attracted millions of young workers between the ages of 25 and 54 from South Asia and Southeast Asia. The labor system is sharply divided. While the public sector follows localization policies designed to protect jobs for Emirati citizens, the private sector is almost entirely dependent on foreign workers, who occupy up to 99.5% of all positions. Most UAE nationals are not interested in low-paying manual labor jobs. Private recruitment agencies have taken advantage of poverty in workers' home countries, advertising Dubai as a paradise that promises a life-changing opportunity. The result is a workforce that powers the private economy while making the UAE one of the world's largest sources of remittances, sending around 45 to 50 billion US dollars every year to developing countries. It appears to be a perfect economic machine. But ask yourself this. Is there something fundamentally wrong with a system where 99.5% of the private workforce consists of foreigners? Can an entire empire really be built purely on the kindness of strangers? Or is there a much deeper calculation hidden behind this system? But ask yourself. How do you control an enormous population of migrant workers who make up almost the entire private workforce without fearing they might rebel? The answer is not guns or bullets. The answer is an invisible legal weapon. A pair of invisible handcuffs that lock onto workers the moment they arrive in the country. Do you like pearls? That elegant piece of jewelry is connected to the origin of the legal system that now controls millions of workers across the Gulf. The Kafala sponsorship system is not a modern invention. Its roots go back to the pearl diving industry of the early 20th century. When oil transformed the Gulf into one of the richest regions in the world, this old labor system evolved into a modern legal framework designed to regulate and control the massive flow of foreign workers. The system is remarkably powerful. Under the law, a migrant worker's legal residency and immigration status remain almost entirely under the control of a local sponsor, known as a kafil. This is where the system becomes controversial. Responsibility for migrant workers is handled by the Ministry of Interior, not the Ministry of Labor. That alone reveals how authorities often treat migrant workers, not simply as employees, but as individuals whose presence must be closely monitored. The result is a severe imbalance of power. Workers lose many of the freedoms most people take for granted. They cannot simply resign from their jobs whenever they wish. Changing employers usually requires the approval of the current sponsor. Even returning home may depend on receiving permission from that sponsor. This unequal relationship creates an environment where exploitation can easily occur. One of the most powerful tools within the system is the accusation of absconding. If a worker decides to leave because wages are unpaid or working conditions become unbearable, the employer can report them to the authorities. Once that happens, the worker's visa may be cancelled. From that moment, a legal worker can suddenly become an undocumented resident, facing heavy fines, detention, and deportation. Although reforms such as Federal Decree Law No. 33 of 2021 were introduced to improve labor protections, many workers still remain tied to their employers until lengthy transfer procedures receive official approval. Think about that for a moment. In this system, the perfect employer may simply be one who doesn't report you to the police after you resign. The legal framework already restricts workers once they arrive. But what if they save enough money to buy their own ticket home? To prevent even that possibility, another trap begins long before they ever board the airplane. It is called the recruitment debt trap. Let's do a simple calculation. Before migrant workers even board a plane to Dubai, many are already trapped in a financial system that is extremely difficult to escape. This is the recruitment debt trap. Recruitment agencies and labor brokers search for poor workers and require them to pay enormous amounts for visas, recruitment services, processing fees, and airfare. For many workers from Bangladesh, these costs range between $2,500 and $5,000. For families living in poor rural communities across South Asia, that amount often represents several years of household income. Studies have found that up to 99% of Indian migrant workers borrow money at high interest rates or mortgage family property just to finance their journey. Some even sell their last remaining assets in the hope of finding a better future. Once they finally arrive in Dubai, their first priority is not improving their lives. It is paying back the enormous debt they accumulated before leaving home. On average, workers may spend 5 months to 2 years simply repaying these loans. Recruitment costs can consume as much as 62% of the total salary they expect to earn during their employment contract. The situation becomes even worse because the wages they actually receive are often much lower than the salaries they were originally promised. As a result, many workers spend their first 1 or even 2 years working almost entirely to repay recruitment debts rather than supporting themselves or their families. But the exploitation does not end there. Another devastating blow often comes the moment they arrive. It is the confiscation of their passports. Although UAE law officially prohibits employers from taking workers' passports, many companies and subcontractors continue the practice under the excuse of safekeeping or administrative management. Without their passports, workers lose one of their most important forms of legal identity. They cannot freely purchase a ticket home. They cannot travel independently. In many cases, they cannot even seek help from their own embassy when their rights are violated. The crisis becomes even more severe when subcontractors suddenly collapse financially. Some employers simply abandon their businesses and flee the country to avoid debts. Thousands of migrant workers are then left behind with no wages, no passports, and no employer willing to take responsibility. Almost overnight, many workers become undocumented residents through no fault of their own. Without identification, without savings, and without a passport, escaping becomes nearly impossible. Imagine spending $5,000 just to obtain a job that pays only around $300 per month. For countless workers, what began as an investment in a better future quickly turns into a financial disaster. Meanwhile, without documents, without money, and carrying thousands of dollars in debt, these workers are pushed far away from the prosperity they helped build. They entered what was advertised as the land of gold. Instead, many found themselves trapped in something entirely different. Welcome to Sonapur, officially known as Muhasna. In Hindi, Sonapur means land of gold. It sounds like a place filled with opportunity and prosperity. But the reality is very different. This area houses an estimated 150,000 to 300,000 migrant workers and was reportedly built on the site of an old cemetery and crematorium. Adding to the harsh conditions, it is located beside a massive city landfill that produces a constant foul odor throughout the year. According to the transcript, the area remains largely hidden from tourists, with limited public transportation connecting it to the rest of the city. If you think crowded dormitories are difficult to live in, the conditions inside Sonapur are even more extreme. Imagine a room measuring only 12 to 15 square meters. Now imagine 15 people living inside that single room. The space is packed with metal bunk beds placed side by side. There are no personal lockers. Workers hang their clothes on the bed frames or stuff their belongings underneath the beds because there is simply nowhere else to store them. Overcrowding reaches another level when workers on different shifts are forced to share the same bed. One worker leaves for work, while another immediately takes that same bed to sleep. The mattress barely has time to cool before someone else uses it. Sanitation conditions are equally difficult. Hundreds of workers often share only a handful of aging toilets. Blocked drainage systems regularly cause wastewater to overflow into common walkways. The communal kitchens are extremely hot and lack proper refrigeration. Food spoils quickly in the intense desert heat, increasing the risk of foodborne illnesses. During the summer months, temperatures often reach 45 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius. Tin roofs and concrete buildings absorb enormous amounts of heat, turning the rooms into ovens. Many accommodations have no air conditioning. Instead, workers rely on old ceiling fans that provide little relief from the extreme temperatures. According to the transcript, conditions become even worse when companies fail to pay wages or contractors abandon their businesses. Landlords may disconnect electricity and water supplies, forcing workers to leave despite having nowhere else to go. Imagine sharing a bed with someone who has just finished an overnight shift. For many migrant workers, this is not an occasional hardship. It is everyday life. Living under these conditions is already an enormous challenge. But in 2026, the transcript says an even greater disaster struck, pushing thousands of migrant workers from hardship into a struggle for survival. Living in such harsh conditions is already beyond what most people could endure. But according to the transcript, 2026 brought an even greater disaster, turning the lives of migrant workers from hardship into a fight for survival. Let's go back to late February 2026. A major geopolitical conflict erupted in the Middle East, and the crisis quickly spread across the Gulf region. According to the transcript, the UAE became the target of more than 2,800 missiles and drones. The country's economy was suddenly shaken. Luxury tourism slowed dramatically. Investment declined as wealthy individuals moved their capital elsewhere. The International Monetary Fund reportedly reduced its economic growth forecast for the UAE in 2026 to around 3%. But when an economy slows down, the burden often falls first on those with the least protection. For many migrant workers, wages were reduced by half. Others were placed on unpaid leave. Many workers had their contracts terminated without warning. Even after losing their jobs, they were still expected to pay for their own flights home at a time when airfare prices had risen sharply because of regional airspace restrictions. At the same time, inflation pushed the prices of food and basic necessities much higher. Small grocery stores serving low-income communities reportedly saw prices increase by 2 to 3 times, making daily survival even more difficult. According to the transcript, one of the most controversial issues emerged during emergency situations. Foreign workers were allegedly excluded from public rescue programs. The transcript states that bomb shelters were reserved for UAE citizens, leaving many migrant workers unable to access the same protection during missile attacks. When warning sirens sounded, many workers reportedly remained inside labor camps with nowhere safe to go. The transcript further claims that dozens of people lost their lives and around 70 migrant workers were seriously injured during attacks affecting desert labor camp areas. Many had traveled thousands of kilometers hoping to escape poverty. Instead, they found themselves trapped in the middle of an armed conflict far from home. According to the transcript, the dangers did not end with the war. Another invisible threat was waiting. Extreme climate conditions pushed summer temperatures in Dubai to around 48 degrees Celsius. Construction workers, delivery drivers, and other outdoor laborers faced severe dehydration, heat exhaustion, sunburn, impaired concentration, workplace accidents, and long-term health risks. Although midday work restrictions existed, the transcript argues that unusually early and prolonged heat waves made existing protections less effective. Many gig workers reportedly continued accepting deliveries under intense pressure from ride-hailing platforms, fearing lost income if they refused. Some workers reportedly collapsed on the scorching roads while trying to complete their jobs. For thousands of migrant workers, surviving the heat became yet another daily battle. According to the transcript, the greatest threat was not only the war or the extreme heat. It was also the way workers' voices were allegedly silenced. The transcript claims that authorities introduced an increasingly strict cybersecurity and censorship system. As of May 2026, it states that more than 1,000 people across Gulf countries had been arrested for sharing images or commenting about the conflict on social media. The transcript further claims that police carried out random phone inspections of migrant workers in public places. According to the transcript, anyone found storing videos of missile attacks or footage showing poor living conditions inside labor camps risked heavy fines or imprisonment. The transcript also describes pressure from employers. It claims that workers were warned not to complain publicly about unpaid wages or living conditions. According to the transcript, posting such complaints online could result in being reported to authorities and facing expulsion from the country. As a result, the transcript describes an atmosphere of constant fear. Millions of workers reportedly felt unable to speak openly because they feared losing both their jobs and their legal status. The transcript argues that many workers lived under continuous surveillance. It describes a situation where workers feared that their phones could be monitored while they also struggled to survive under temperatures reaching 48 degrees Celsius. The transcript asks readers to imagine living without freedom of speech, without secure legal protection, and without possession of their own passports. After describing these conditions, the transcript shifts toward possible solutions. It argues that the crisis facing migrant workers is no longer simply an economic issue. Instead, it presents the situation as a broader humanitarian crisis. According to the transcript, the prosperity and luxury of Gulf megacities cannot be considered sustainable if they depend upon the suffering of millions of low-income workers. The first proposed solution is the complete abolition of the Kafala sponsorship system. The transcript argues that responsibility for work visas should be transferred from individual sponsors to the Ministry of Labor, giving workers greater legal independence. It also recommends eliminating the legal offense of absconding and allowing employees to terminate abusive contracts without fear of criminal penalties. The second proposal is to require employers, not workers, to pay all recruitment expenses, including visa fees, agency commissions, and airfare.